This is the third series of Dream Space from Factory International, and I'm Gemma Cairney, your host for this episode. As a long-time radio presenter who's been an avid art lover for even longer than that, I'm fascinated by how dreams connect groups of people, how we cast our dreams broadly in the art that is broadcast, inspiring us all to imagine greater realities or at least have a good time. Because our dreams can allow us to see the potential in things. They can perhaps give us momentum to have ownership for our lives and our creativity, which is our birthright. In Dream Space, we introduce you to artists, creators, and visionaries who are doing the work of dreaming differently and bringing it to us by exploring society's infinite possibilities. Yes, it's that big. In the previous episode, we spoke to Terence Lewis, and in today's instalment, we'll be speaking to my long-term comrade, Anne Hobbs, about how we can upend the systems that restrict our collective ambition.
What we're going to do, right, is we're going to behave like a pirate radio station.
Yes!
And we are going to hack every social media network, every TV network, and every radio network every single night. And we're going to broadcast the culture forecast. And there's going to be nothing anybody can do to stop us.
A DJ, curator, music journalist, and radio presenter, a polymath, Anne Hobbs has decades of experience in platforming underground and experimental artists. She aims to shine a bright light their way and give them the tools to build on their own terms. She started her own zine, written for world-famous music publications, presented both pirate and BBC radio shows, and has even taken the stage as an experimental performer herself. Here's Anne Hobbs and her Dream Space. Hello.
Hello, Gemma. What a delight to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
It's so nice to have you. Honestly, I feel connected to my radio peers in a way that can sometimes be hard to put into words, except for we share something, don't we?
We really do.
So what do you think bridges the gap between our dreams and reality? And I am in a geek way in terms of our mutual interest of live broadcast and art, interested as to whether they're all in a similar spectrum or Venn diagram. Do we dream together when we make art or make radio? What do you think?
It's a really interesting question, this one. And I think for me, it begins right at the outset of my life. You know, I had to dream a pathway into existence. When you grow up in a small northern village in the late 1970s, as you can imagine, it's a pretty desolate environment. So I guess the short form is I ran away to London and I lived on a bus for a year in a car park with a rock band called Heretic. And the reason for that was because I saw it as the first step on the causeway. You know, I couldn't imagine another opportunity to get a shot at rock and roll. So I just took off, and that's what I did. That's how I began at the age of 18. And it was a relatively hairy existence. I remember at night, it was bitterly cold, and we used to sleep in all our clothes with cardboard boxes flattened, piled up on top of us just to keep us warm. It was kind of a crazy time. We were all working day jobs, so a couple of the band were grave diggers. Myself and the singer worked in a sweet factory. Some of the others worked in a factory where they made dog dishes. We used to live on a bag of chips a day. We'd go to the local chip shop every night for our tea. And we used to save up all the money that we had so that we could go out on the road. We could actually go on tour. Because, of course, in those days, you had to pay to play.
When I found out about this, I could hardly believe it, because I've known you for so long and I never knew that you'd had this time living, you know, not inside a traditional home. It's not quite homelessness, is it? But at the same time, there's this kind of, I get this feeling of like, this like maternal sense of protection over younger you, because I can imagine that it wasn't always 100% safe.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, it's a really interesting experience having no fixed abode and living on a bus with a rock band. But as you might imagine, it's kind of hardcore. I guess the sanitation also was a huge problem when you live in an environment like that. There was a public toilet up the street. I'm going to say it was like 20 minutes walk or thereabouts to go to the loo. And it was such a rancid place. You actually couldn't touch any surface, but you could use the facilities if you could just figure out how to hover above them. So it had many challenges, but it also taught me that you have to build your own pathway into this world, into this space that you want to inhabit, I suppose, as a creative person.
I think being able to dream your way out of harm or pain, or I am going to go back to the sense of unsafety, because I can relate to that. I think my childhood was quite troubled, but I think that it made me a huge dreamer. Like, my imagination was always in technicolor and always thinking futuristically about how luminous things would be as long as I could keep hold of the dream space. And I wonder whether any of us that have suffered somehow or had struggle, had to work hard to get into these kind of quite glamorous seemingly positions that we can be in, whether our dreams are kind of more vivid somehow.
I think I just had no idea how to begin at all. When I was a kid, I used to buy a music paper and I would sit on the post office wall and literally flick through this paper and think, this is evidence that another world exists somehow out there, and I have to try to find this place. And I think you're right, your own safety doesn't really concern you at that point. You're just charging towards something that you can't even really conceive of. It only exists in, I suppose, physical form in a newspaper, but liminal form as a radio program with John Peel, perhaps. But your life in a tiny village in Lancashire really doesn't bear any evidence that this world could exist for you. So you have to charge towards it and see if you can find it and see if you can create it for yourself. You have to have that degree of imagination that's really vivid, and that, I suppose, that sense of being fearless enough to just step into the unknown and see what happens. And I don't know, maybe to a point, the industry is still very, very chaotic, as we know, isn't it? And there is no linear pathway whatsoever. You just have to figure it out. And I think you and I are perhaps evidence of the fact that you can take any route you want if you're driven enough. I'll tell you what we're going to do in my dream space, Gemma. We're going to begin by inverting the entire system. The whole of the art system. We're going to turn the whole thing upside down. I love the idea of actually really addressing the fact that young people they're in a really challenging position in 2025, aren't they? It's incredibly difficult to get into the arts. It always was, as you and I have talked about, but I think even more so now. It's a huge struggle. Youth clubs are closing down. Many of the university courses are inaccessible to people for financial reasons. As we know, education across the arts is being cut to the quick. And spaces all over, club spaces, small venue spaces are closing. So we need to address this. And as people of a more senior generation, we need to divert our resources into creating an environment in which young artists can flourish. We're going to shake down all the money from the top and it's going to fall like pennies from heaven to the ground. And we're going to fund all the young, upcoming artists who need a chance. This is what needs to be happening on the ground in every single town and city. We can't expect really any capitalist forces, any governments to really support this, so we have to do it for ourselves, don't we? In my dream, of course, we'd have all the billionaires and the trillionaires' money. So, but by virtue of the fact that it's highly unlikely that they're even going to share 20 pence with us, I still believe that we can self-organise. So that's the basic principle. But there's so much more to this dream. So this is based on experience that I have of mentoring in communities in Middlesbrough and Hull. And I believe that there's so much that you can do on the ground, especially when you engage with the elders in those communities and you look for their advice and for their guidance. And I believe that there's so much that young people can learn from, I suppose, people like you and I, hopefully, who can offer experience and offer guidance. I think for young people, it's incredibly valuable to learn different skill sets. It's incredibly valuable to learn to research without the use of AI and understand how to cross-reference and tell a true story. It's incredibly exciting to be given an opportunity to learn how to paint or how to DJ, how to play a musical instrument, how to protest, how to understand your rights. And I think we can create community environments on the ground that are really, really beautiful spaces where young people can come together. And I would like to see those projects manifest themselves wherever young people decide might be an exciting place. So it could be in a bedroom, it could be on a beach, it could be at the Royal Opera House, who knows? But ultimately, it's for the young people to decide what they want to do with their creative projects. And that would be my great dream.
Oh, it's made me emotional, genuinely, because I think that you are a generation above me a bit, nearly, not quite.
I'm 61, so I'm up there.
I turned 40 this year. And I have become an interdisciplinary, intersectional artist. But I have also, since embracing this side of myself, since kind of properly moving on from the status quo or what's expected of me, found it so difficult to be heard in the same way that someone younger than me might be feeling it too. And I found myself saying, how can I be an advocate if this system is so flawed, bureaucratically, statistically, systemically? You know, the racism, the sexism, the classism. How can I really say art can change our lives for the better?
My experience is that once you go into a community and you begin a very basic mentoring project, it's really astonishing how quickly young people will take the baton and just go and do the work for themselves. And there's a wonderful man, I've got to shout him out, his name's Steve Kirby, he works in Middlesbrough. And after the first mentoring project that we put into play in Middlesbrough, they're called scaffolding sessions, these sessions that we do, he immediately identified the 4 people who I suppose really shone in those sessions and he felt were ready to do this. He offered them funding and he offered them access to the space that he has jurisdiction over in the city and handed them a night and said, what do you want to do? I'm here to work out whatever finances you need to make this event happen. Let's go.
Which I really like as a message of hope. And I think it presents a mirror again of just thinking about what we do have and what we value. And I think space is, as in physical space, is as key here as actual money. And we need to look kind of at this organisation in a really innovative and futuristic way. I know you're thinking about this through the language of cartography and forecasting and thinking of maps and looking at the UK. I can see the UK in my mind's eye. I'm in your dream. Your dream is beautiful. I've already cried. I've told my life story. How do we get the keys to open the doors to these community spaces so that we can organise?
Yeah, I think sometimes you just have to kick the doors in, don't you? So let me tell you about the map, because I feel like if we could initiate the map, then a lot of people would buy in. So I have an idea, and this is the sort of, I guess, this is the part that exists in a liminal space. And as you say, it's based on my love of cartography. And it's also based on my love of forecasting. So I love a great weather forecast. I love the shipping forecast, don't you? It's such a beautiful thing.
Yes.
And I guess every night we're used to experiencing a weather forecast of some kind on our devices. So my idea is that we have a culture forecast. There's a map of the UK, and wherever one of these events is happening, where young people are taking ownership of their ideas, their space, their dreams, this is represented with a flare on the map. And if you live locally to that flare, you can telescope in and find out more details about each event. And hopefully, even if we begin with one flare, Gemma, we can soon light up this map. Because what we're going to do, right, is we're going to behave like a pirate radio station.
Yes!
And we are going to hack every social media network, every TV network, and every radio network every single night with the with the world's finest hackers. And we're going to broadcast the culture forecast. And this will be the project, the voices of the young people, as denoted on this map. And there's going to be nothing anybody can do to stop us.
Oh my goodness, Mary-Anne, you have not disappointed. This is a beautiful space. You're speaking my language. And I love that it's quite macro, as well as the fact that it's, you know, we're in micro community. If we're in the mainstream, then it starts to permeate into just like the general energy. I wonder if some of these very grey towns that we have that have been forgotten about all over the UK, and I've been all over the UK, and there's some places that you just feel have been forgotten about, and if suddenly a liveliness, the vitality is in the ether, kind of more upbeat, and is everyone suddenly an artist, I wonder?
Yeah, wouldn't that be exciting? And the whole thing would just blow up like a tinderbox. It'd be amazing. But again, to sort of circle back to radio and the kind of pirate ethos, there's an amazing man, Gemma. His name is Henny G, and he used to be the aerial builder when Rinse FM was a pirate. And there's an incredible documentary which traces an element of his story. But, I mean, he used to go to B&Q hardware store and buy a ton of copper to actually make the aerial, and then bribe the caretaker for a set of keys for a tower block in East London and take all his crew onto the roof and build the aerial. And then there was some kind of shady deal so that they could actually get a transmission frequency for Rinse to broadcast on when it was still a pirate. But it's one of the most inspirational stories that I've ever heard, really. And I feel like there's a sense of, in my dream for you, there's a sense of us taking that power back and broadcasting what we feel is really significant and hacking a system to show the world what we care about. It doesn't matter if it's illegal, let's just do it anyway. Who's going to stop us?
What a frequency. What a vibe. Who would you love to be kind of part of this? Like, what voices would you love to hear?
I think you're right about the communities that feel really isolated at the moment. And I believe passionately in the younger generation, and I understand how fortunate I am to live in a city like London. But I know that a lot of the communities in the UK are, they're facing very, very challenging circumstances in 2025 with the march of advanced capitalism. And I would like to feel that even people in communities who feel there is no opportunity for art in their lives, it's almost like the last thing on the agenda, that actually they could be inspired by something like this and believe that this project could be for them. And they can begin at a ground level. It's like, what do you want to learn about? Because we can find people to teach you. I remember during lockdown, I had a really wonderful conversation with Femi Kolioso, who you probably know. He's the drummer of Ezra Collective. And Femi said to me, can you imagine if every young person in the UK had a mentor and they had a hand of friendship to reach out to them and to say, what is it that you would like to do? Let me help you. He said to me, I think the UK would be a completely different place. And I have to say, I totally agree with him. And that's what this project would be. It's a hand of friendship for anybody who needs it and wants to take it.
And does it go back to the dreams of younger you, where you found like the physical vessel that was the transport that took you to another place? It was this bus, it was punk music, it was a vibe, that like took you places. Do you think that that's what's inspired such an open dream?
Yeah, I suppose it is. I think if you were to see that kid who was 18 years old living on the bus in the car park in London, she would have killed for that hand of friendship. And maybe it took her 61 years to find herself in a position where she could offer it. But you're right, I think it goes back to that young person that I was, where I was just kind of looking for a break, and I honestly had no clue how to find it. I just saw a tiny chink of light, and every time I saw that chink of light, I'd run towards it, and I'd jump across the threshold and see what happened. I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't, to a point.
Does anyone? Let's be honest.
But you're right, it's that girl who recognises now the position of relative privilege that she's found herself in. And I don't mean that in any form of material way. I mean it in terms of experience in the world and understanding, hopefully, what it is that I can contribute back.
There's this deep sense of reciprocity, which is very infectious.
When people do come together, the young students that come in to be mentored and the older people, the mentors that take part, even if they've never done it before in their entire lives, everybody walks away with the richest of experiences and this incredible sort of symbiotic exchange, which does seem to catch fire in everybody and really act as such a powerful motivating force. Myself, I learn so much about the perspectives of young people, what scares them, what makes them angry, what do they care about, what do they love, what do they dream of, what do they need, what do they want? How can they deal with things like anxiety around social media? And they give me a perspective that I could never see, I could never understand on my own. It's interesting that people seem to have a lot of anxiety around social media. So you can offer people ideas about how to view it more as a tool, perhaps, than a primary form of communication, which is what my generation do, or certainly what I do personally. And I think that human exchange, that exchange of ideas and energy in every community would really help to revitalise what needs to happen with the arts on the ground.
I would say that the difference now, that person with big dreams wanting to get away from their everyday life is looking into their phone and they are scrolling at the speed of light.
I think we're living in a time at the moment where people's attention is fragmented constantly by the nature of social media, by the nature of what it is that we see on phones. And I feel that phones are a blessing and a curse in equal measure. And yet, a lot of what I do on a phone is a wonderful thing. You know, I can connect with artists all over the world via DM on social media that wouldn't have been possible when I was growing up as a kid.
Have you had any beautiful real-life moments where finding community online has been a massive success?
The short answer to that is no. But in real life, there are many examples that I could give to you. And I think as a species, humankind, we need that form of connection, don't we? We need to be physically present with one another. There's a lot that I can say about the word community. I think it's a beautiful word. But I guess I hadn't really experienced it until I was involved with the early dubstep scene, which was around about 20 years ago. And we began as a small family. We built a community, and then that community became a global movement for a time. And it was a wonderful thing to witness. I remember the early days of the dances, you know, DMZ and Forward, which were infamous. And if 10 people showed up, we thought it was a big night. But community in this case was very much a self-organising system. It was amazing to see how it operated. So there were DJs and producers and people who put on the club nights, and there were journalists and photographers and myself as the broadcaster, and a tiny little collection of people with the same great passion and great drive brought this community forward. And I suppose this was on the cusp, really, of the internet becoming widely used. But it was very primitive at that point. There were only really, I guess, forums where people could discuss and share ideas that they'd heard. But it was as a consequence of the internet, I suppose, that we were able to create a kind of global tipping point for the sound.
Being part of an actual scene, a DIY happening, this dream formalizing itself in a way, the dubstep one that you described. How did that feel? Did it feel exciting, and did it feel like your dreams were coming true?
It just felt really incendiary. I remember putting together the first ever showcase at Sonar Festival for dubstep. It was the year of 2007. We took the sound out to Europe for the very first time, and there was myself, Scream, Mala, Oris J, Code 9 and the Space Ape. And we got to the stage. Gemma, it was gigantic. It was a late night gig, and I remember I began at 12 midnight, and for about the first 10-15 minutes, the entire place was completely desolate. But then these rivers of bodies just started to flood into this arena. It was just absolutely wild. And Code 9 ran up to me and he was like, "Oh my God, they're coming, they're coming."
The people are coming.
Oh my God. And by the end of the night, I mean, the scene was absolutely one of the wildest things I've ever seen in my life. And the following morning, all the headlines on the papers across Europe said, you know, dubstep takes sonar. But we went with no expectation. When you're in the moment, you experience it very differently to the way that you do when you have 20 years distance and you can look back and reflect on actually what it was that was happening. And it's almost only afterwards when you see the very raw, rough video footage in those days and the photographs that you can actually believe that it took place, that it really happened. It's quite interesting to have this discussion with you because I'm thinking, just for one moment, can you imagine humanity without art, without music or culture in any form? What a dead zone that would be.
I know.
It's chilling, isn't it?
Tell me about these billboards that are actually out in this tangible real world as an intervention, provoking us to work out what our needs actually are. What do you want? Tell me more.
Right. So this was the question that we posed at Manchester International Festival this summer. I came up with the question, what do you want? Because I thought it was really foundational in 2025. And the beginning of the project was a giant billboard, Gemma, on the side of a wall in the Northern Quarter in Manchester, with that question splattered right across the centre, and an invitation to any passerby in Manchester to make a response. We also had a little postbox underneath, so if you didn't want to write a response directly onto the billboards, you could post a letter into the postbox too. It was a beautiful expression of the way that Manchester feels in this moment in history. As you can imagine, it's pretty rowdy in the Northern Quarter, so, you know, it's spiky on that board, but it was personal and political and beautiful and furious, tender, hilarious, outrageous, all of these things. And myself and the violin player Anna Phoebe, we created the project together, and we then went on to give a live performance in the warehouse space at the Aviva Studios building. I wanted to take some of the voices, some of the words from the billboard, and turn them into a spoken word piece, which happened at the epicenter of the live set, which was such a beautiful thing. Everybody was screaming and cheering as I read out these pieces. But it was very much a love letter to Manchester. I built in all of the young artists that I feel are making really significant work on the ground in the city. There's a really interesting lighting structure. I wanted it to function as a structural form rather than a light show. So it's a circle of lights. And it was kind of interesting as a social experiment because it cast a circle on the ground in light. And when you think about the question, what do you want? And you really examine that, the mind will occasionally build a boundary that can be illusory. And the nature of the circle of light was to represent this. So if you had been in the audience, you could step across that circle of light at any point. There was no security around the stage. You can come right up to where me and Anna were performing. And it was interesting. Some people did it right away. Other people stood right back and observed it as a boundary. It was just there as a kind of subconscious marker to, I suppose, to indicate to people what's holding you back here. There isn't really anything. You can breach this circle. There's no tangible physical boundary here at all. There is also just a third part of this piece, what do you want to come? So with some of the commission money that we had, a big chunk of it we threw in the direction of this amazing young filmmaker called Josh Bridge, who works in Manchester. And we gave him the premise. What do you want? Make a short film. Here's the cash, which also very much plays into the idea of we've got some beautiful resources here. Let's share a little bit of it. It's a really nice thing to do. It's wonderful to be able to empower this young filmmaker that we see at a distance, just creating the most beautiful work.
I love it. I really, really love this dream space. I'm finding it very... it just feels really needed. It feels really necessary and emergent. And like I said, and I'll keep going back to it, very generous. And I think we've sort of forgotten how to think outside of our own individual wants. You know, my dream is to have a really nice pair of trainers. How can I magic them up? Oh man, I know exactly what they look like. But at the same time, how about if everyone's got those trainers or is making the trainers, or we can all get hyped about them together?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we need a cobbler. So we can just make our own shoes, right?
Yes, we need a cobbler. We so need a cobbler. Thank you so much for your dream space, Mary-Anne. I have loved it. I'm going to think about this one for a long time. And I'm really excited that people will be listening for the first time and can come back to it. And this will be a resource in its own right. Let's get culturally forecasting. I'm there. So much beauty and inspiration to reflect on there. I feel really, really, really thankful for Mary-Anne's dreams. If you enjoyed this episode, then make sure that you like and subscribe to the podcast. Share it with your mates. It's always really nice. We were talking about generosity. Just give them a little message saying, I think that you might enjoy this. Put it on a social media network if you fancy, to your chosen community, because your support really does make a difference to get the word out there. And if you can't wait until the next episode, then you can head to Factory International's website to find more creative content on Factory Plus. And if this is your first taste of the Dream Space universe, then come on in. We're having quite a nice time. Thank you for joining us. We'll look forward to seeing you back here next time. Before then, treat yourself to some quality dreaming with one of our previous episodes. Dream Space was hosted by me, Gemma Cairney, and this episode was produced by Derek Amar, with sound design by Solomon King and music by Andrew P.M. Hunt. The executive producer is Dan Jackson, and this is a reduced listening production for Factory International, curated by Scott Simoniti and Alex Mannion-Jones.